This is the Feldenkrais podcast, and we're about to do a Feldenkrais lesson. It'll be done lying on your back, so get yourself arranged on the floor, get comfortable, maybe have a pad if you need something to lie comfortably with something behind your head. And you'll rest on your back to begin. But before we actually start the lesson, I just wanted to remind you that if you're interested in learning more about the Feldenkrais Method, you can come to feldenkraissd.com, and it's spelled FELDENKRAISSD.com, to get more resources and information and articles and things. So if you'd like more information about the Feldenkrais Method, check out that website. And also, Feldenkrais San Diego is a place where you can, if you're on Facebook, you can also go there and be a friend and kind of follow videos, things like that. So it's feldenkraissd.com, and Feldenkrais San Diego is for Facebook. So we're about to start the lesson. Begin on your back, get comfortable here, and just notice how you fit on the floor. So spend some time noticing which areas of your back make contact with the floor as you lie like this. Listen to how the back settles on the floor. Tend to your breathing. Please bend both knees and stand your feet so your feet are flat on the floor and the knees are pointing to the ceiling. And take the right arm toward the ceiling, as if to reach to touch the ceiling. So that means that the right arm is directly in front of you. And the right hand will be in the air over your right shoulder. And a few times, just begin by reaching the arm toward the ceiling. If you reach the arm toward the ceiling, keep the elbow completely straight. And each time you reach the arm, you'll notice that the shoulder has to lift. Right? If you bend the elbow, then the arm bends. And if you keep the elbow completely straight and reach the hand toward the ceiling, you'll notice that the right shoulder comes away from the floor. And a few times, lift the arm, lift the hand toward the ceiling, and let the right shoulder lift a few times. And just get a sense of how well does the arm reach? How heavy is the arm? And notice what that's like. Right, a few times just reach the right arm toward the ceiling. And each time you reach the arm toward the ceiling, then let the arm rest. The arm stays vertical the entire time. It doesn't come up and down. It stays vertical. But the movement is sort of a piston movement. The arm is lifting toward the ceiling, and then the shoulder, the head of the shoulder rests back on the floor. Then again you reach the arm toward the ceiling, which means the shoulder lifts away from the floor. And then you allow the shoulder to come back to the floor. So the arm stays vertical the entire time. The hand is directly above your own right shoulder. And it's just this lifting and lowering of the arm. So just gently explore the ease of this movement. How heavy is the arm? How simply can you reach the right arm toward the ceiling? Obviously, it's not about how high you can lift the arm or whether you can touch the ceiling. It's just this idea of lifting the arm vertically, directly, because you're facing the ceiling, reaching the arm directly forward. So do that a few times. Observe the weight of the arm, the ease of the reaching, kind of the quality with which the arm reaches. Get a sense of that, and then rest the arm on the floor again. So your arms are resting at your sides. You can let both legs lie long or keep your knees bent. And take a break. Rest. When you take a rest, It's just an opportunity to notice, is there a difference? Just from doing a few movements of reaching the right arm, is there anything about how the right arm lies on the floor that's a little bit different compared to the left arm? See if you can observe a difference in the two arms or in the two shoulders, how the two shoulders rest on the floor. And please bend the right knee, stand the right foot. So now you have your left leg long and straight, and the right knee bent with the right foot standing flat on the floor. Your two arms are at your sides. A few times, press the right foot into the floor. And each time you press the right foot, listen to how the right hip lifts a little bit. So when you press through the right foot, it leverages the pelvis a bit. The right hip lifts, and you'll notice that the right hip lifting pours weight into the left side of the pelvis. So let the right foot pressing allow your left hip to get heavier. So sense that. Sense how pressing the right foot pours weight into your left hip. Many times press the right foot and feel the left hip getting heavier. Right? You press the right foot into the floor and you notice the right hip gets light. The right hip begins to lift and the left hip gets heavier. So we're going to explore this further. We're going to refine this a bit. So continue this idea of pressing the right foot into the floor, and as you press the right foot into the floor, also consider taking the right knee directly, like lengthen the right knee away from you, so that when you press through the right foot, you're going to feel your right knee lengthening as if to come over the toes of the right foot. So the right knee lengthens, it moves away from you, and again, that lifts the right hip. So you're going to feel there's a spaciousness created in the right hip joint. Let the right knee extend forward over the right toes of the right foot, and that creates a lightness and a weightlessness in the right hip. So the right hip comes away from the floor, and that weight is distributed onto the left hip. So the left hip takes the weight of the right hip. Right? It's sort of this suspension. You're pressing through the right foot, and the weight pours onto the left hip, and the right hip is lifted. It's sort of suspended between the right foot and the left hip. So play with that idea of taking the right knee forward, away from your hip. Lengthen the knee so the knee gets longer, and it travels in the direction of over your right foot, over your right toes. And just feel where that creates space, what gets lighter, what lengthens, what gets longer. A few times extend the right knee forward like this. Feel the weight pouring onto the left hip. There's also kind of a lengthening and elongation of the whole spine as you press through the right foot. Very gentle elongation of the spine. There might be a tendency as you press through the right foot to let the right knee fall inward. If your right knee falls inward, you'll feel that there's more weight on the inside of your right foot. So be clear that there's weight fully distributed throughout the right foot. And if you listen to the weight on the foot, the right foot, you'll notice that there's weight on the outside of the foot, just as much weight on the outside of the foot, or more. And then you lengthen the knee over the toes of the right foot and feel how the right hip lifts. Now bring the right arm toward the ceiling again, so you have your right arm vertical, the right hand above the right shoulder, and a few times return to reaching through the right arm. So the right arm lifts, the right shoulder lifts. And then combine the two movements. So push through the right foot, lengthening the knee toward the right toe. So the right foot presses the floor, the right hip lifts. As you reach the right arm toward the ceiling, so the arm and leg lengthen, the right hip and the right shoulder lift, and the weight pours toward the left side. So you're rolling toward the left side. And as you lift the right arm toward the ceiling, as you lift the right hip, as you roll, as the weight rolls onto the left side, allow the head to respond. So see if the head turning, does that positively or negatively impact the ability of the hip and shoulder to lift? So explore the idea of just reaching the arm, and as you reach the right arm, allow the head to turn. Does the head turn more easily to the right or to the left? Try it either way and see which way can the arm reach better. So you reach the arm, let the head turn, push through the foot. So right now the hip, the right hip and the right shoulder lift and come back toward the floor. And then they lift toward away from the floor, and then they come back to the floor. So many times explore lifting the arm toward the ceiling. As you reach the right arm toward the ceiling, push through the right foot and feel that the right hip lifting assists the right arm in reaching. Leave it alone, rest on your back. And observe any differences in how you fit on the floor now. Can you sense a difference in how the right side of you rests on the floor compared to the left side of you? Are there any parts of you closer to the floor or heavier or lighter or longer? Get a sense of the difference. We've done some movements on the right side and we haven't done them on the left side. And see if you can determine what the difference is and how the two sides lie on the floor now. And once again, please bend your right knee so the right foot's standing flat on the floor. That means your right knee is bent and the right foot is flat on the floor. And a few times just press the right foot into the floor so the right hip lifts. And just see, has this gotten a little bit easier? Is it a little simpler? Is the right hip a little lighter? So you're pressing through the right foot and listening to how the right hip lifts as a result of pushing through the right foot. Just see, maybe this is a little lighter or more supple or simpler in some way. Notice if there's a difference you can determine in your ability to press the foot and let the pelvis roll toward the left. So the pelvis rolls to the left as you press through the right foot. Now leave the pelvis resting on the floor with the right knee bent. Please take the right arm to the ceiling so the right hand is resting above the right shoulder, the elbows completely straight, the arm's vertical in the space, and the hand is pointing toward the ceiling. A few times reach the right arm and just see how well does the right arm reach. Is there anything lighter about reaching the arm? Does it lift a little better, or maybe it lifts a little higher? Is there a difference in your ability to reach the right arm? Again, the right arm reaches, the right shoulder lifts, and the arm stays straight. Now press through the foot so the right hip lifts as the right shoulder lifts. So the whole right side is lifted and the whole left side is weighted. So notice how the whole left side rests on the floor. And then lower the right shoulder and hip. And a few times lift the right shoulder and hip, and then lower the right shoulder and hip. So feel when you press through the right foot, when the right hip lifts, when the right shoulder lifts. So leave the hip and shoulder in the air. And a few times lower the shoulder toward the floor. So you leave the hip in the air and you lift and lower the right shoulder. So again, the right arm is completely straight. And you just lift and lower the shoulder many times, slowly, gently. And just see about keeping the right hip in the air and the right shoulder lifts and lowers many times. Like a piston, it lifts and lowers. You'll feel the right shoulder blade slide and the right shoulder, the head of the right shoulder coming toward the floor and then lifting away from the floor many times. Notice what that's like. Can it be easier or freer? Once again, lift the shoulder and the hip. And then do the opposite of that. Keep the shoulder lifted and lower the hip, the right hip toward the floor, and then lift the right hip. So you're pressing through the right foot to lift and lower the right hip, but the right shoulder stays in the air. So the right shoulder stays up, and now the right hip is lifting and lowering. It's doing something different than the shoulder is. The shoulder just stays up, and the hip is coming up and down because you're pushing through the right foot, and then you're not pushing through the right foot. So the right hip lifts and lowers many times. Now drop the hip back to the floor, bring the shoulder back to the floor, and then a few times lift the shoulder and hip a few times. And notice, do you roll more simply? Does the arm reach more easily? Does the hip lift more simply? So a few times lift the hip and shoulder together as the weight pours onto the left side. And then a few times lift the shoulder by itself. So reach the arm toward the ceiling. Let the right hip rest on the floor. And a few times reach the right arm and notice, is this a little easier or lighter? Is there a little more freedom in the reaching of the right arm? Notice that and rest on your back. And resting on your back, notice how you fit on the floor now. Notice if there's a difference in the connection that you make on the floor. What do you observe about how the right side of you lies compared to the left side on the floor? Is there anything about the way the shoulders fit on the floor that's different from the right side compared to the left side? Maybe one arm feels longer or heavier or flatter against the floor. See if you can determine a difference of some kind between the two shoulders on the floor. Which shoulder blade makes a fuller contact? Observe that. Observe the difference in the two legs. And as you rest on the floor with maybe the legs are long, or if that's uncomfortable for your low back, keep the knees bent. But observe the difference. Is one foot turned out more than the other? Does one leg feel longer or heavier or lighter? So we're listening for differences. We're observing changes we've created. We've done all the movements on one side, and see if you can sense the resulting difference that we've created. Please bend your left knee, stay on the left foot, and a few times press the left foot into the floor and allow the left hip to lift a few times. Very gently press through the left foot. Feel the left hip lifting and lowering many times. Very simply. We did this on the other side, and now doing it on the left side. Notice, is there a difference? Do you feel a difference in how this hip lifts? Think of the things that we did on the right side. As you press through the left foot, allow the left knee to lengthen away from you. So the left knee gets longer in the direction of the left toes. To feel the difference, allow the left knee to fall inward a bit. So the left knee moves a little to the right, and notice, is there a different sensation in the left hip joint? There probably is. And then once again, bring the left knee over the left foot so it's really vertical. The knee is vertically, directly over the foot. And like this, lengthen the knee forward toward the toes of the left foot. Feel what that's like. Really clarify this relationship of lengthening the knee and allowing the left hip to lift. So creating this space in the left hip joint, as well as the space in the low back area, the sacral area. Feel how that gets spacious simply by pushing through the left foot. So a few times press the left foot and listen to, as you lift the left foot, you'll also notice that you're pouring weight into the right hip. So the right hip gets heavy as the left foot gets heavy. You press through the left foot and the weight pours into the right hip. And of course there's weight in the left foot that's pressing. And then there's this feeling, there's this lightness, this lifting in the left hip. Leave that. Take a rest. And please reach the left arm toward the ceiling now. So now the left hand is directly above the left shoulder. The arm is vertical. Go ahead and bend the left knee so the left foot is standing. The right leg is long. And with your left arm, reach the arm forward, right, which is directly in front of you. And you're oriented, you're facing the ceiling, so you're reaching your left arm toward the ceiling. Because your left arm is straight and long, the only thing that can happen is the left shoulder can lift. So with the elbow straight, allow the left arm to reach and feel how that lifts the left shoulder. And just notice the ability of the left arm to reach. How well does the left arm reach forward? And you'll notice as you reach the left arm that it's similar to what happened in the pelvis. Observe that as you reach through the left arm, notice how there's this shifting of weight and there's this pouring of weight into the right shoulder. Right? The right side of the back takes more weight as the left side gets lighter and the left arm lifts. So observe that as you reach the left arm upward toward the ceiling, forward, the weight is pouring into the right side of the shoulder, the right side of the upper back. Right? The chest is turning to the right. And to make it simpler and more comfortable, if you allow your head to turn to the right, observe that as well. Let the head turn to the right, and notice that that allows the left arm to reach better. Right? If the head turns to the right, along with the rest of the spine, the right arm reaches better, more clearly. Now press through the left foot, as you reach the left arm. So the left arm is reaching as you push through the left foot, and then bring them both back. Notice when you reach the arm as you push the foot, is it helping the arm to reach a little more easily? Allow the head to turn to the right. So the entire spine is turning to the right. Leave everything alone and rest on your back. Take a break. Notice your hip joints as you lie on the floor. And sense the contact that your shoulders make with the floor. How your arms are arranged on the floor. We only spent a little time on the left side, but do you feel a little more symmetrical lying here now? Please bend the left knee, stand the left foot, so the left foot is flat on the floor and the left knee is pointing to the ceiling. Take the left arm toward the ceiling, so the left hand is directly above your own left shoulder. The elbows completely straight. And press through the left foot so the left hip lifts, and then lower the hip. Now raise the left arm and lower the arm. So first lift the hip, let the hip lift, feel the weight pour into the right hip, and then lower the left hip, lift the left arm so the left shoulder lifts from the floor, and then lower it. So first lift the hip and lower it, and then lift the shoulder and lower it. And just many times lift the shoulder, then lift the hip, go back to the shoulder, lower the shoulder, and then lift the hip. A few times explore lifting one and then lifting the other. Lifting one and then lowering it, lifting one and then lowering it. And just discover that movement. Feel when you lift the arm, how the chest responds, the upper back responds. Maybe your head turns a little bit to the right as you lift your arm, or maybe it stays in the middle. And then let the shoulder come back to the floor. Push through the left foot so the left hip lifts. When the left hip lifts, feel how the whole pelvis rotates, turns to the right. The left hip lifting, and then lower it again. Now lift the arm and the leg together. So you lift the hip and the shoulder, and you're turning the whole torso to the right, including the head. A few times lift the arm and the hip, and just feel if this is getting easier to lift the arm. Does the pelvis lift more easily? Well, the left side of the pelvis, does it lift more easily as the left arm is reaching? Now leave the hip in the air and the shoulder in the air, so the arm's directed toward the ceiling with the elbow straight. Now leave the hip in the air and lift and lower the shoulder. So you reach the left arm toward the ceiling, and then you lower the left shoulder toward the floor. And many times it's this sort of piston movement of lifting and lowering the arm. Right, with the hip lifted in the air. Notice that, feel what that's like. And then leave the arm in the air so the shoulder's up, and do a similar movement of lifting and lowering the pelvis, the left side of the pelvis. So you're pushing through the left foot, and the left hip lifts and lowers many times, but the left shoulder stays in the air and the left arm is reaching toward the ceiling. So the pelvis, the left hip is doing something different than the shoulder. The shoulder is just remaining in the air, lifted, and the hip is lifting and lowering many times. And leave that. Now lift the shoulder as you lower the hip and then lift the hip as you lower the shoulder. And as you let the shoulder lower to the floor, lift the lift the shoulder. So it's like a seesaw. As the hip lifts, as you push through the left foot, the left hip gets heavier. And I'm going to say that again. Sorry about that. Press through the left foot, the left hip lifts away from the floor. As the left hip lifts in the air away from the floor, then you allow your left shoulder to come toward the floor. And then lower the left hip toward the floor as you're lifting your left shoulder. So it's this seesaw, kind of this oppositional movement. As you lower the left shoulder toward the floor, allow the left foot pressing to lift the left hip, and then do the opposite of that. Lower the left hip as you lift the left shoulder. And many times have the shoulder and the hip pass each other, one lifting as the other's lowering, one lowering as the other's lifting. See if you can breathe evenly and steadily and not have your breath interrupted by this non-habitual organization of your torso. So the shoulder is lifting as the pelvis, as the left hip is lowering. Let the left shoulder lower as the left hip lifts. Then let the left shoulder lift as the left hip lowers. So many times the shoulder and hip are moving in opposition to each other, lifting and lowering. Leave it all alone. Leave the hip on the floor, so the left hip is resting on the floor and the left shoulder is resting on the floor. And a few times, return to reaching the left arm and notice if this has gotten easier. Does the arm reach a little more simply, a little more comfortably? Maybe the movement's a little larger or more expansive. See if you can determine a difference in the quality with which the arm reaches. Is it lighter or more supple in some way? Rest the arm on the floor. A few times press through the left foot and also determine, does the left hip lift a little differently? Is this easier as well? And then rest on your back. Sense the contact you make with the floor. Listen to your breathing. And observe any differences that you sense in yourself after exploring some of these movements. Is there a difference in the areas that make contact with the floor? How your weight's distributed on the floor, is it a little bit different? When you're ready, please roll to your side and slowly bring yourself to sitting. Observe yourself in sitting. How do you sit on your pelvis? Is it a little bit different? When you're ready, come all the way up to standing. Observe yourself standing on your feet. Your ability to turn and look over one shoulder, maybe that's improved. And go ahead and take it for a walk and observe differences. Thank you very much.